Hey there Wargamers, Justin the Arm Painter here from Death Ray Designs, and today we're going to be showing you guys how to paint gold. For today's tutorial I have prepared two Space Marine icons for you. We have a Blood Angels teardrop with wings and an Aquila. Now the reason that we have both of these, despite them being the same, they are slightly different in the depth of the wings, and I wanted to kind of show you guys how to paint gold on both of these and give you a visual on how the wash and all the steps will come together for two different but similar pieces. I started by basing these pieces today with a brown paint. Specifically in this case it was Dark Highlight from Reaper, but you could spray any color brown you want down. It's important to note that when you're working with metallics that what color metallic you want to apply on top dictates what base you would apply. Today we're working with gold, so I started by prepping the base of the model with brown. If you are working with silvers, you might base them in black. The colors we'll be using today are pretty straightforward. We're going to be using Vallejo Model Color Brass, as well as Vallejo Model Color Gold, with a touch of Vallejo Model Color Silver. With our pieces based and the paints laid out, it's time to start getting to work. Now there's no super secret technique here. We're simply going to be applying a base layer of our Model Color Brass. Remember when applying your paints that you do thin coats, and if necessary, do multiple layers. I find that flesh colors and metallics are particularly brutal if you don't allow them to dry and you come in for a second layer of paint too quickly. You start getting streaks and chunks and bits of paint everywhere, and just be patient. Remember that when you're painting, you should be having a cathartic, kind of therapeutic experience. Don't rush it, have fun, develop some patience. And there we go. With a little bit more brass paint applied, our Aquila is done with its initial base coat, and it's time to transition over to our Blood Angel icon. As I said before, and I cannot express this enough, make sure you apply multiple thin coats. Don't be impatient, don't rush it, don't go too fast. Have fun with this. That's the whole point of the painting process. And there we go. Now that we've applied two thin coats of our Model Color Brass, it's time to transition over and apply some wash. For that, we'll be using some Citadel Druchii Violet. For this particular step, you can use any color wash you want. You might even decide to use a Reikland Flesh Shade, a Kerber Crimson, a Sepia, Agrax Earthshade, or maybe even a Nuln Oil. I tend to favor the Druchii Violet though, because I like the particular hue you get from applying purple over gold. As with previous tutorials, I like to thin my washes a little bit, and in this case we're going to be mixing our Druchii Violet with some matte varnish from Liquitex in about a 1-to-1 ratio. You could use some Lahmian Medium from Citadel if you wanted to, but I really favor the Liquitex matte varnish simply because it's really affordable for the amount of volume you get. It may seem much more counterintuitive at first to thin your washes, but I like to do this because it allows me to have a much more subtle effect when applying my shades to miniatures. And given the investment required to grow our paint selections, by simply learning to thin down our washes, we can get a lot more variation in colors and shades from one purchase versus multiples. So get that hobby bang for your buck in action. With our wash mixed up here, it's time to apply some to our miniature. Now it's important to note that we want to move quickly here. If you get too much in any one area, you can come back in with your paintbrush and use the capillary action to pull some of that wash off. When I'm applying the wash here, I'm paying particular note to where all of the low points are and where the shadows will be, trying to make sure I'm focusing in on those areas. I've come in here as well and applied a bit more of a dense amount of wash to the top where there would be shadows up under the underside of the wings. I'm trying to make sure I'm pushing where the shadows would be and paying particular note to where the light sources are going to be coming from. Remember using this wash to get in there and provide depth and get details, but it's also a good way to add shadows. One thing you don't want to do, however, is to come back and touch an area that you've applied wash to while it's halfway through drawing. When it's fresh, that's fine because you can manipulate and move the wash around, but if it's half dry and you touch it, you may pull part of the wash off and leave part that's dry, and then get these weird splotchy effects on your miniature and totally ruin the effect you're going for. Remember that when applying a wash, gravity plays a major role in where the wash is actually going to pool. So the way that you set the model down to allow it to dry is going to be impacted by gravity. So use that to your advantage. If you want certain parts to be darker than others, make sure you angle the particular piece when you set it down so that the wash pools in those areas. With our Aquila drawing, we're going to come in and apply the same process to our Blood Angels icon as well. All the same principles will apply. Make sure you apply it in a thin coat, focus on the areas where the shadows are going to be, and create that depth. Have fun with this. Just like we did with the Aquila, we're going to come in here and apply a little bit more of a dense amount of wash from the top side and get a little bit of that dark recess up under the top wing as well. With our wash applied to our Blood Angel icon, it's time to lay it down to allow it to dry. We're using that gravity as well, and it's going to pull up towards the top of the wing here where we want the maximum amount of wash to be. Alright, it looks like our two icons are dried and ready for the next step. You'll notice that when looking at these, they're not quite as shiny as they were, but that's okay. The highlights are going to bring that sheen back, and we do have some really nice purple hues here on both of these that are really nice. For our first highlight, we're going to be coming in here with Model Color Gold from Vallejo. For our base coat and washing on these, we used a crappy brush. For this step, we're going to be using Natural Bristle Kolinsky Sable Brush. To get things started, we've prepared our Model Color Gold from Vallejo and thinned it down a little bit. We're going to be using this particular color to come in here and edge highlight all of the feathers here on our Aquila. We're going to apply this on the very edge, and again, like we've talked about in previous tutorials, when you apply your paint and you pull, the direction that you pull, the last spot that the paintbrush touches is going to leave the most amount of pigment. So in this case, we're going across each one of the feathers, and it's going to be leaving a dense amount of paint right on the edge. It's important to note that we are specifically doing tight edge highlights here. We are not repainting the whole surface. If you begin to just put paint all over the feathers, you're going to lose the depth that we created with the wash. We're going to continue this process across all the feathers on each wing. Some of these are going to have a lot more surface area to do an highlight on over others. Some of them may even need just a dab. Take your time, do what feels natural, and get these nice highlights on here to push that depth. So we've approached the halfway point here, and you'll notice there's one spot that I have not addressed, and that's the area right here above the wing. We're going to leave that for last, and I'll explain how to do that and the skull once we've finished the other side. Alright, with both sets of feathers done, it's time for us to come in here and get the tops of the wings as well. We're going to get a little bit of paint in our brush here, and we're going to be using the side of it to drag across the wing to do our highlight. You'll notice I'm using the back of my thumb here to drag some of that paint off and get a point. We're going to come here and use the side of the brush, hit the top of the wing here, trying to leave some of the brass and the wash on the underside there. Very nice, very nice. Now we're going to come in here and load up our brush again. Just need a little bit of amount, dragging on the back of my hand here to get a point, and we're going to drag the side of the brush across this wing as well. There we go. Using the same technique, we're going to come in here with the side of the brush here and get the top part of this crevice. Again, we're not painting the whole surface here, we're getting an edge highlight. We want to leave some of that brass showing. Now we're going to come and hit a really high point again, just to get that color in there. Come to the other side, do the same crevice. Now we're going to come in here and we're going to put a very light edge on the underside of the wing there, creating that depth. Again, you can see I'm not painting the whole surface, I'm edge highlighting and leaving that brass and washed area to show through, creating that depth and helping give us the luster that we want on this Mini. Now we're going to come in here, use the side of our brush and hit the tops of the little eagle heads as well. Same kind of process, trying to focus on the high points where the light would hit the surface. Now for the last portion here, we've got the skull to attack. We're going to come in here with our loaded paintbrush. We're going to start dabbing the teeth very gently, just a quick little dab right here. There we go, moving our way across the surface. Now we're going to come in here and get the bridge right above the teeth. Changing our angle of attack here just to make sure we're getting a nice amount of paint there for the highlight. And we're going to come in here and we're going to dot the bottom corner of the eye socket where the light would catch. There we go. Do the same on the other side as well. And we're going to catch the side of the skull, put a little line there, same on the other side. Put another line here right up to the brow. We're focusing on all the hard edges here, all the high points on the skull. There we go. Very nice, it's starting to pop here. Focusing on the brow a little bit, getting the top of the nose. Now we're going to come across and do a line right across the top of the scalp here. And there we go, looking nice. Got all of our initial edge highlights done. With the edge highlights done on our Aquila, it's time to transition over and start working on our Blood Angels icon. So let's see how that's going to turn out. Now I've sped this portion up a bit because it's the exact same techniques that we followed on the Aquila, but I want you guys to see how it's applied to another miniature as well. You guys can do this on anything from icons to custodes to even granites if you're taking these types of techniques and applying them to the silver as well. So as we're going through the Blood Angel icon here, you'll see that I'm working on all the same edge highlights in the same type of fashion, even though they're different shapes, different feathers. And when we get to the tops of the wing as well, we will be using the side of the paintbrush to get in there and get a tight highlight. With the feathers done, we're going to be coming in here and we're going to be doing the highlight on the tops of the feathers now using the side. It's important to note here that we've got kind of two areas to focus on for this highlight instead of just one long one. So you'll notice that I'm doing a little bit of an edge on one portion, and I'm coming in and doing an edge on the other one, allowing the point where they would make contact to remain dark. So you get that depth and the illusion that there's two different pieces here, not just one. So I'm coming in here and doing the curvature right up next to the blood drop, and doing the same thing on the other side as well. It takes a little practice, and I'm not perfect, but with a little bit of practice, you can do everything I'm doing and better, I promise. With our edge highlights done on our Aquila and Blood Angels icon, you could stop here, but I've got another step left that's really going to take these to the next level. So we're going to be taking our model color gold, as well as our model color silver from Vallejo, and we're going to be mixing these 1-to-1 to create a more extreme highlight to push the depth. So after mixing these two together, we've got this bright whitish kind of gold, which is what we're going for, sitting next to our original brass color, and that's our gold right there. So you can see we have a trifecta of colors, and this is going to be our extreme highlight that's going to complement these two very well. We're going to be coming in with an extreme highlight, but only on the edge of these feathers. It's important to note that when you're applying this, you only apply it to the extreme areas. You want to leave some of that previous gold showing through. If you don't do this and you start covering up all the previous stuff, you're going to lose that depth we've created. So in some cases, we'll be doing an edge highlight. In some cases, we'll be just dabbing on a little bit of silver. It really depends on what surface we're on, how big the area is, and so forth. For here, we're putting a really, really small amount, again, leaving that gold showing through and that dark brass kind of purple tinted recess. Now we're going to come in here and we're going to start applying this extreme highlight to the feathers as well. Remember, we only want to put just a little bit right on the edge. These spots right here next to the skull are almost dabs, very, very small amount. As we come to the wings, you'll notice I'm focusing right on the edge, not even going all the way up the wing, just right on the edge, just a little touch, a little dab. As I've mentioned before, I'm a big fan of Bob Ross, and as he might say in this case, 2 hairs and some air, and you could not be farther from the truth. As with other techniques I've explained, sometimes I'll come back in and I'll put a little bit more in an area. You can always add more paint. You can't come back and take paint off very easily. So when you're doing this, go slow, place it on even if it's subtle, and then as it dries and you feel comfortable adding more, if you want to intensify the highlight or the effect, feel free to go back in and experiment. Just remember, apply small amounts and work your way up. Don't just glob paint on there immediately. With a little bit of practice, you can get some awesome depth and some awesome gold on your miniatures. Alright, so it looks like we've got our first wing done. You can see that luster and that shine on that right side. Looks really nice. You can see how it's still dark on the left side. We're going to go ahead and get those highlights going on the right side, and we'll be back when that's done. Alright, and with a little movie magic, we've got our left and our right wings done, and that still leaves our skull and the tops of the wings here to go. Now, one of the important things to focus on when we're applying this paint to the edges is we want to focus specifically on the edges. We don't want to apply this to the whole area. So we're going to try and focus right up to the edge. About halfway, and we're dragging, you can see we're leaving some of that gold showing. Still leaving the darker gold in the recess. We're going to kind of dot a little bit on the kind of elbow, I guess, portion of the wing, and then we're going to come in and apply a very small amount of paint into the crevices and other parts of the wing here to just give a little bit of a high point and a highlight to these as well. We really want to push that depth and have lots of little areas where the paint is lustrous and glowing from the light source. We're going to drag our paintbrush across the tops of the eagle heads as well, just a little bit, make those look nice. Look at that shine. It's looking great. And we're going to come in and similar to what we did before, we're going to dab the teeth a little bit on the skull here. And as with all the other portions of this model, as we approach the skull, we want to make sure we're applying little bits of paint to the high points. We don't want to lose the previous layers. We don't want to lose the brass and the gold we played down previously or the wash. You know, by layering this up, we're going from a dark recess to an extreme high point. It's helping push that depth and give that illusion that there's really bright gold here and a nice light source that's giving it a shine. I really enjoy painting the skull on this portion as well because it's got nice areas that scream for a highlight. It's very easy to target. Sometimes when we're working with edge highlights, you're not sure exactly where to put them. But with that, we finished our Aquila, and that looks really nice and really shiny. Now, as you can see, with the Aquila lined up next to the Blood Angel icon, you can see the difference that extra highlight makes. So all that's left is for us to come in here, apply the extreme highlight on this Blood Angel icon, and we'll be able to conclude today's tutorial. Alright, so we finished our feathers on the Blood Angel icon here, and that leaves the top portions that we still need to hit with the extreme highlight and the area near the gem. Now, how we're going to approach that? We're going to approach these very similar to what we did with the Aquila here, where we're going to hit the extreme edges. But we have a couple of points up here we need to hit, so we're going to have to make sure that we're hitting those and still creating that depth, leaving the previous layers that we laid down. So just like we did on the Aquila, we're going to grab some of our silver paint. We're going to hit just the edge. Try and taper and feather that out. Sometimes you can rub your finger across it to pull off excess paint, just like so. We're going to come in here and hit just the tip there as well. And then we're going to have to get ready to come in here and kind of hit the elbow portion of the wing here. I'm going to hit just right at the top. This one can be a little bit tricky, but you can definitely do it. The same principles apply. You want to create that hot spot, that high point. As we finish up with the elbow portion here, we're going to get ready to prep to do the crescent that's just below it, and this one's also important because you don't want to hit all the gold. You just want to hit just a kind of a little bit of a dab. Again, create that light source, create the area where the light would hit. And on the other side, we're going to put a little bit as well, kind of in the top left portion in this case on the screen, and that's going to give us that nice luster, and you can see the difference between the left side and the right side. With the left and right side of this wing done, it's time for us to dress the blood drop in the middle. So what we're going to do here is we're going to apply some silver paint, and we're going to focus on just the top left edge and then the bottom right side. We don't want to cover up all the gold, we just want to put a little bit right here, kind of coming down, and we're creating the extreme glint of light that's going to be present on the gold, and that's exactly what we want. We don't want to overdo it. We're going to come in here and just do a little bit more here at the top, drag it down, and there we go. Looks nice. Now we're going to come in and we're going to go to the opposite side on the bottom corner. See, we're not overdoing any of this. We're creating a light source on one side and a little bit on the opposite side, but leaving that dark recess, the brass and the gold we placed previously, the wash, and creating that depth. And there we go. Our gold is complete. There's a few other things you could do on these models, like this one. You could paint the skull an actual bone color. On this one, you could paint the blood gem. In both cases, on both of these, you could use different washes, or even push the highlights even more by adding more of a silver edge on these. But in today's case, I think these are done. I know in this particular case the Blood Angel icon does not look complete because that blood drop is not finished, but we will be doing a tutorial later on how to paint gems and lenses, and you'll be able to learn how to complete that then. With the gold now dry, I think we're going to call these two pieces complete. If you haven't already, we'd like to encourage you guys to like and subscribe, ding that little bell so you get notifications when we put up new content, and it's important that you do because our next video tutorial is going to be explaining how to paint gems, and you'll get to see that Blood Angel icon finished. As always, we'd like to get feedback from you guys, so if there's anything we could do to improve, any content you'd like to see us work on, or any particular techniques you'd like to see us showcase, make sure you sound off in the comments below. We do enjoy engaging with you guys, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. If you happen to use any of these techniques on your own miniatures, make sure you check us out on Facebook and our Facebook group, The Tap Garrison, or maybe even consider tagging us on Instagram. We really do like to connect with you guys. We'd like to see what you're working on, and honestly, there's way more of you than you are of us. And that means you're going to be painting a hell of a lot more models than we will, and we get motivated when we see what you're working on. So we really do want to see those miniatures. If you'd like to help support the channel, make sure you check out deathraydesigns.com. Anything you do over there helps keep the lights on, it helps keep me employed so I can continue to produce content for you guys. I'd like to thank you guys again for hanging out with me today. I've had a blast working on these tutorials over the last several weeks, and I'm excited to see what kind of content I can produce for you in the future. I can tell you there should be some more tutorials. We'll be working on some tactical videos and hopefully getting into doing some more battle reports. On that note, folks, we're going to be signing off. As always, happy wargaming.